At the family dinner that evening, I eased myself into my chair with the awkward stiffness of someone carrying a wound far heavier than a simple broken bone. My right arm, swallowed up in its thick plaster cast, hung uselessly at my side like a chained weight. I couldn't hold a fork, couldn't even manage to tear off a piece of bread. So I sat there, hungry, humiliated, and silently observing the people who claimed to be family. The dining room was filled with a tense, unnatural quiet. Even the guests, three of Marcus's colleagues, kept their eyes low, as though afraid that even glancing at me might somehow pull them into my humiliation. My daughter, Sierra, broke the silence with a soft whisper, but her voice carried that timid, overly careful tone she had adopted since her marriage. My husband had once taught her strength. Marcus had taught her fear. Marcus's laugh, loud, sharp, and self-satisfied, cut across the table, and the old woman, the one who believed she still commanded this household, that she still had authority in these walls, was reminded of her new place. But I merely smiled, because some truths only reveal themselves with time. 10 minutes later, the doorbell would ring, and Marcus, smug, arrogant Marcus, would finally learn who held real power in this house. Before I take you further into this story, my friends, allow me a small request. If the tale you're about to hear resonates with something inside you, do subscribe and click the like button. And tell me in the comments which corner of the world you're listening from. It fills me with warmth to see how far and wide our family of listeners extends. Happy listening. The scent in the room was thick. Roasted duck glazed with apples, fatty juices dripping down the browned skin. For most people, it would have been a symbol of festivity, of warmth, of family gathering. But for me, seated at the head of my own table, it was merely a reminder of what I could not lift, could not cut, could not taste. It was a mockery of my helplessness. The plate before me was flawless china, white with gold trim, part of a set my late husband and I had bought in New York City 4 decades ago. It was elegantly placed, perfectly spotless, and painfully empty. My casted arm lay on the table like a slab of marble, cold, unforgiving. Beneath the plaster, the swollen flesh pulsed with each heartbeat, delivering waves of dull, deep pain that radiated upward to my shoulder. I didn't need the X-ray to know the truth. I had known the moment it happened. I had heard the unmistakable crack, the dry, brutal snap like a brittle branch when Marcus shoved me against the doorframe. "Well, folks, don't be shy. Dig in." Marcus's voice boomed arrogantly across the table, drowning out the quiet clinks of silverware. "The duck today is fantastic. Sierra really outdid herself." He sat at the head of the table, my husband's seat, with all the entitlement of a tyrant who believed the throne belonged to him. He unbuttoned his asphalt-gray jacket, sweat glistening on his flushed face from the heat and the alcohol. He attacked the food with a kind of crude, animalistic hunger, slicing off massive chunks of duck and shoveling them into his mouth. Grease glistened on his chin, yet he didn't bother with the napkin. He wiped it with the back of his hand like a man raised without manners. The guests, 2 men, 1 woman, sat stiffly around him, their eyes glued to their plates. They were his subordinates from the city planning department, people whose promotions, leave approvals, and holiday bonuses depended on Marcus's signature. They saw me, a dignified, aging black woman with a broken arm and an empty plate, but despite the injustice, they feared him more than they pitied me. Fear is a powerful silencer. I flexed the fingers on my left hand. They obeyed, but the duck platter was far away, deliberately placed out of reach. Marcus had made sure of that. "Marcus," one of the guests, a young man named Sam, whispered timidly, "maybe we should serve Dr. Ashworth?" "Stay out of it, Sam," Marcus snapped, pouring himself another shot of vodka. The crystal glass clinked sharply. "Dr. Ashworth is on a diet today. Therapeutic fasting clears the mind. Right, Mama?" He turned to me, his vodka-clouded eyes glinting with twisted satisfaction. Not remorse, never remorse. Only triumph, the sick triumph of a bully who believes he's finally broken the spirit of someone who once stood taller than him. Mama brought this on herself, Sierra added quietly. My daughter sat beside her husband, looking pale and fragile in her beige dress. She cut her cucumber slices with mechanical precision, her eyes carefully avoiding mine. Old people lose coordination, Marcus continued, speaking loudly enough for his guests to hear me, as though I was some cautionary tale. She went climbing up to the top shelf yesterday. Can you believe it? I told her, "What are you doing, old woman?" But she wouldn't listen. He erupted into rough, barking laughter. The guests forced fake smiles. I watched Sierra. I had spent 30 years as a neurosurgeon, 30 years studying the human mind, connecting with families at their most vulnerable, restoring speech, memory, movement. But I could not pinpoint the exact moment when I lost my daughter to fear, when she had become a ghost molded by the man beside her. It was an accident. You have to understand, Mama. You must listen to the head of the house. You don't command anyone here. My stomach cramped. I had eaten nothing for nearly 24 hours, not since Marcus threw me in the hallway and demanded the deed to the condo. Hunger gnawed at me, but its pain paled beside the throbbing in my fractured bone. The grandfather clock ticked rhythmically. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It was my father's clock. It never lost time, not once. Marcus lifted his glass. "To discipline," he announced. "Every home needs order and hierarchy. The one who pays the bills calls the shots, and the one who lives on charity," he nodded toward me, "should keep quiet." He downed the vodka and stabbed a pickled mushroom with predatory delight. Inside me, something shifted. Not anger, not anymore. Something colder, something steadier. The same icy calm I felt before every surgery, when all emotion must be cut away to make room for precision. I sat up straighter, and my voice, when I spoke, was soft, but razor-sharp. "Marcus?" The word sliced the air cleanly. He froze. The guests froze. Even Sierra's knife stopped moving. "I said you are sitting in my husband's chair, and by my calculations, you have exactly 1 minute left to enjoy it." He turned, flushing red with indignation. "What? You're threatening me? Gonna hit me with that cast?" He laughed at his own joke, loud and crude. "Go ahead, count it down, 59 seconds, 58. But I didn't respond. I simply watched the clock. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that the silence in this condo hadn't been submission. It had been a countdown. The second hand struck the top mark. And with that exact perfect tick, my arm throbbed with renewed pain, and my mind was pulled back to 24 hours earlier. I remembered the smell of stale liquor and dread in the air, Marcus pacing, sweating, panicking like a rat cornered by debts he had no means to pay. He screamed at me, spit flying, demanding money, threatening everything he could think of. I stood my ground. He attacked. The shove, the crack, the fall. Sierra watching, doing nothing. He locked me inside my own bedroom, tore out my phone line, stole my cell phone, and told me the notary would come tomorrow. Either I would sign, or he'd have me committed to a psychiatric ward. He forgot something critical. I was a surgeon, and surgeons do not panic. With my good hand, I reached my emergency kit, a syringe, a painkiller, and an old flip phone I kept charged out of habit. I injected myself. I assembled the phone. I dialed a number I had not used in 20 years. Ring, ring, ring. "Speaking," I whispered. "It's Alice. I need help." There was no surprise on the other end, only immediate action. "Where are you?" he asked. I gave the address. "Wait." A sharp ring at the door yanked me back to the dining room. The grandfather clock chimed 8 times. The doorbell wasn't polite. It blared through the condo, shaking the glass in the cabinets. Marcus flinched, but quickly recovered, wiping his greasy mouth with the napkin as he stood. "There," he said smugly. And then, everything changed.
he proclaimed triumphantly, addressing the hushed guests, his voice brimming with the cheap confidence of a man who believed the world bent easily for him. "And you were worried. Punctuality, the courtesy of kings, yes, yes, Dr. Ashworth." He glanced down at me, savoring the moment, his eyes shimmering with the greedy excitement of the easy profit he thought was within reach. Then, as if performing for an audience, he added loudly, "It's the attorney, ladies and gentlemen. I called him for 8 sharp. Just a bit of paperwork, a small formality, family matters, nothing serious, and then we'll continue the feast." Sierra exhaled loudly, relief washing over her as she lifted her wineglass with trembling fingers. "Thank God," she whispered. "Mama, please, just sign. Don't make a scene." I didn't answer her. My silence was my rebellion. I simply tightened my grip on the armrest with my good hand. The painkiller I had injected into myself the night before had long worn off, but adrenaline now surged through me, numbing everything except my clarity. Marcus, humming tunelessly under his breath, swayed his way toward the foyer. I listened to his heavy footsteps fade, the hallway swallowing them one by one. Then the click of the lock echoed sharply. Come in, dear friend," he called out, syrupy and false. "We've been waiting. I hope the papers are ready. We have a little old woman being difficult, but—" His voice didn't trail off. It snapped, cut cleanly like a rope pulled taut and sliced mid-air. The dining room fell into a stunned silence. Guests glanced at one another nervously. Sierra froze, her wineglass hovering at her lips. I stared at the empty doorway, because I knew what was coming. Marcus believed he had opened the door for his accomplice, a pathetic, trembling man who would, for a few thousand, certify any theft under the guise of law. Marcus was drunk on the arrogance of impunity, on the delusion that he held dominion over a frail old woman supposedly losing her mind. But he had opened the wrong door. He had opened the door not to a notary, but to his judgment. The hallway filled with a silence so heavy, so unnatural it felt as if the air had been sucked from the entire condo. Then I heard it, the slow, deliberate thud of heavy combat boots on hardwood. The sound was steady, unhurried, the sound of authority, not bureaucracy. These were not the footsteps of an attorney. Marcus's breath caught somewhere between his chest and throat, turning into a strangled hiss. "Governor Sterling?" he stammered, the thunderous voice he'd been using minutes ago now withered into something frail and pathetic, the sound of a child being scolded. The name itself struck the table like a hammer. Guests froze mid-motion. A piece of duck slid off a fork onto a white tablecloth, unignored. No one in that room was prepared to hear the name of the man whose portraits hung in their offices, the man who could destroy or elevate lives with a single signature. "What an honor," Marcus sputtered from the hall. If only I had known you'd grace us tonight. We were just having a family dinner, Governor Sterling. Two figures appeared in the doorway. They were not men. They were mountains carved into the shape of soldiers. Dressed in black tactical uniforms, no insignia, no names, yet their bearing screamed military authority. They positioned themselves at the entrance, silent sentinels, cold eyes sweeping across the room. Marcus stumbled backwards into the dining room, bowing frantically to someone still unseen. "Please, come in. Governor Sterling. Guests, stand. Sierra, stand. It's the governor himself." And then he entered. William Sterling had aged. 20 years had carved lines across his face, silvered his hair, and settled responsibilities onto his shoulders like boulders. But his eyes were the same, sharp, unforgiving, diamond-hard, eyes that saw everything. He wore a flawless gray suit that hugged the broad frame of a man who once was a soldier. But the strangest thing, the thing that struck the room like lightning, was what he held. A bouquet. small, modest, wild blue irises. Their vivid blue petals glowed against the somber gray of his suit. Marcus lunged forward, hand outstretched, desperate. "Governor Sterling, allow me! I'm Marcus Thorne, assistant director." The governor walked straight through him. He did not slow, did not look, did not acknowledge his existence. Marcus was simply irrelevant, a piece of furniture, a shadow on the wall. The governor's gaze was locked on me. He approached the head of the table, ignoring Sierra's horrified stillness, ignoring the pale, trembling guests. The condo filled only with the sound of his steady breathing and the soft creak of the floorboards beneath him. When he reached me, he paused. His eyes drifted across the lavish feast, roasted duck, rich salads, sweating vodka, then down to my untouched white plate, to my cast, crudely applied, to my swollen, bluish fingers. His jaw tensed, all color drained from his face. Not anger, something far more dangerous. A deep, quiet, catastrophic rage, the kind that rises like a tsunami before obliterating an entire coast. The room was silent enough to hear the ticking of my father's old clock. Then William Sterling, governor, war veteran, feared man of iron will, did something no soul in that room could have predicted. He knelt. Right there, on the hardwood floor beside me. His immaculate suit brushed against dust, but he didn't care. We were eye to eye now. He placed the bouquet softly beside my empty plate. Then, with the gentleness one reserves for the fragile or beloved, he covered my uninjured hand with his own warm, broad palm. His eyes, normally cold and calculating, held such grief and tenderness that it made my breath hitch. He spoke quietly. "Dr. Ashworth." The crystal on the table trembled. "You told me you fell. But you didn't tell me you were starving." He rose without waiting for answers. He didn't need them. He walked to Marcus's chair, his throne, and placed one hand on it. He did not look at Marcus. He simply waited. Marcus flinched backward as if burned, surrendering the seat at once. The governor sat, owned the space. A bodyguard silently offered a pristine field kit of utensils. The governor selected the knife. Steady, precise hands that once trembled under my care decades ago. He cut the duck with surgical elegance. Small, perfect bites. Food prepared for the weak, the hurt, the starving. When he lifted the fork to my lips, there was no pity, but respect. I ate. Warmth returning to my body. Strength returning to my spirit. Then he asked the question that shattered Marcus's composure. "In this room, who is responsible for the lesson Dr. Ashworth received?" Marcus's lie stumbled out, pathetic and transparent. She fell down the stairs." My voice cut through the room like a blade. "There are no stairs in this condo, Marcus." The silence afterwards was the silence of judgment. Marcus's face drained, realizing his foolish mistake. In his panic, he had forgotten the layout of his own home. "No stairs," the governor repeated, voice low and lethal. Marcus stuttered excuses, drowning in them. The governor stood, towering over him, gaze harder than steel, and stepped into Marcus's space, exactly where the truth waited to swallow him whole.